celebrity podcaster, Clubhouse growth expert. Today we're joined by the one and only Shawn. Anthony, what's good?
Man, what's up, family? I'm glad to be here, man. You know, anytime anybody's talking about podcasting and Mark's involved, I got to be here with the After Hours Entrepreneurs. Let's go.
Hey, I'm glad to have you here. Frankly, I love what you're doing in Clubhouse, and I definitely want to dig into that. But before we get into really what you're rocking out and really what you're blowing out the gasket right now, I want to go back to your starting days of podcasting, right? Your show is called School's Over, Now What? Pretty important topic. A lot of people go to school, they get out, and then they don't know what they're going to do, which might sound obvious, but tell me, what was your motivation? Because you went through the corporate world for several years. Why start a podcast?
Yeah, man. You know, the funny thing about podcasting is that I stumbled across it. Like, you got to think about right now, what are those things that you're doing at a young age that people are noticing about you, and how can you put it all together? Yeah, before like high school, before like college, like I was throwing parties right around that middle school to ninth grade era, man. I was throwing parties. My brother went off to college, so I became this big time party promoter, and I went off to college at Winston-Salem State University. And when I went to school, I took all those networking skills, all those things I knew how to collaborate with others. And I started to realize very quickly that everybody was just graduating. They were just leaving. And so as they were graduating and leaving, I had nobody else to keep throwing these parties for. And I went corporate. I took those same skill sets. I was promoted 6 times in 4 years. And it wasn't until I took a job that took me 6 hours away from my family that I stumbled across that weird purple app, the podcast app, which led me to creating Schools Over Now What? And the reason behind it is because, like a lot of you listening right now, we didn't know what to do after we got that education. But I wanted to impact people that looked like me, that never had a chance and never had a voice. And that's what made me jump into the podcast game.
Well, I'll tell you what, I love this mentality because a lot of people out there have the mentality of, you know, the system is against me. I can't be successful, but you're living proof that if you put in the work, if you're collaborating with the right people, the tools are out there. You know, you just got to give access to them. I'll give you a quick story. I was speaking at a local high school recently for the seniors at a local high school regarding financial matters. I've been in the insurance industry for over a decade, right? Not one kid, Shawn, knew what a credit rating was. Not one. I spoke to over 50 kids. Not one knew what a credit rating was.
I believe it. I mean, dude, it took us till, I remember being in high school. We didn't know how important it was for a GPA till 11th grade. And about then, it was already over.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Like, and I just got to commend you on what you're doing with your show, because getting that education out there and teaching people how to collaborate and build, like, what is actually important? Because I think a lot of young people put priorities in the wrong places, you know, adults too, for that matter. But I want to talk to you about this podcast, School's Over Now What, right? So you got this podcast, you're starting to blow up the network, but I mean, what is the key to actually getting these great collaborations with amazing people? Grant Cardone, Seth Godin, Ed Milet, Jasmine Star, like the list goes on. What's the key to getting these great collaborations?
I think the key, man, early off is 2 things. One, you got to shoot your shot at people. You can't think that, you know, your show or whatever you're doing is not great enough. And the second thing is really getting behind a mission and a purpose. And I think that's what really attracted all these big names. The fact that I was talking about a subject matter that we all can relate to, but most importantly, why them? Why would they be the perfect person for that show, and outlining that for them where it was a no-brainer? And then a whole lot of it is strategy. So a lot of those names that you mentioned, like, you don't just knock on the door and get Ed Milet in episode 1. There was a lot of work done to become relevant and become credible, that when I made that pitch, I've had about 20 people on my show who have been at his house. So it automatically just gives you that level of authority to make those huge leaps. And I think about it now, like even some of my other guests, Beyonce's dad, Matthew Knowles, those type of connections would have never came if I didn't take the leap. Not only just a leap, but taking, you know, the actual flights and getting to in front of these people. I would have never made those connections, because a lot of those connections are also introductions.
Yeah. So that's a really good point. You kind of leverage one person to grow your network. And one of the things that I actually haven't done much for my show, very little bit, is travel. Do you think that travel is something that podcasters should be putting more of an emphasis on, traveling to guests?
Man, it's the game changer, man. I like, for me, I think it's like a blessing, I would say, is for me, the game changer for what I do is when I started to get on the road and I started to get in front of people. The blessing now, though, with COVID happening, it changed how we all were moving. We all stopped taking those flights. And now a lot of people, you have an easier access to them because they aren't, in front of, thousands of people. They aren't traveling. They aren't in front of like a red carpet. So the access has gotten a lot easier. But I will say, for me, if you're a podcaster, if you're ready to travel when the world opens back up, I think that is the real key, because people want that social proof. They like to see you shifting and moving, and you better believe I'm getting back on those planes, fam.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I look at podcasters that are actually absolutely crushing the game, typically they're following this model of traveling. But I mean, that's got to be a big part of your budget, So that's something I've been certainly thinking about, because, you're a father, you're a husband, you got kids, like traveling is tough. So I want to tell me, does that shift the way that you actually reach out to these guests? So you get Ed Milet on your radar, like you've got his attention. When do you pepper in, hey, I'll travel to you? Is that at the beginning, at the end? How do you make that happen?
You gotta let them know, man. And I'm telling you what's so crazy about it. I haven't talked about this, but the moment you tell them you about to do that, they realize how serious you are. And then when you actually show up, they feel the vibe and they feel the aura. Like, I think about it right now, like when I got in my let, and it was like, all right, let's do this, let's make it happen. A lot of people kept tagging us. Before they kept tagging us, now that I think about it out loud, I had this guy named Chris Drama Path on my show. He's the CEO of Young and Reckless. He was doing this podcast called Short Story Long. He now does like group chat in his podcast. And after the podcast, Drama was like, yo, and guys, he's by the way, he's always on MTV with Rob and Big back in the day. He's like,
yep.
Shawn, there's this big guy that you should get on your show. He doesn't look friendly, but I promise you got to get him on the show. I'm like, man, who are you talking about, man? He said MLA. And so then I started doing my research. I'm like, yo, he got the #1 business podcast on the planet. He's worth like $400 million plus, no debt. At least that's what the internet tells you. I'm like, all right, cool. Maybe it'll happen. And my tribe, my audience kept tagging, Ed Milet and us together as like the top 5 favorite podcasts. And Ed reshared a post I made. So I shared it on my Instagram in a story. And I said, oh, that's crazy. It'll be cool for it to happen. He sent me a DM and said, let's do it. And when he said that, I said, all right, let's go. Let's make it happen. And at that point, I knew if I wanted to fly to somebody, one, could this change my brand? Could this elevate my brand? Could this put me in front of somebody that's going to really be able to, give me the thought process that could change how I even think? And he was one of those people. And he came highly recommended. So I said, all right, let's do it. So he gave me the date, and I responded back and I said, yo, I want to fly to you. And he gave me his address, and the rest is history.
That's a legit thing that you accomplished there. Ed is absolutely fantastic. He does look mean, but he's just a wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much for watching. I'm glad you enjoyed this episode. I've got several other episodes right here for you. Smash one of these videos to make sure that you don't miss out on the tips, tools, and tactics of industry experts. Let's take that side hustle full time. Smash one of these links.